The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his ceremonial uniform. 23 years of service to the crown had taught him to notice the smallest details, and today something felt different. The usual bustle of palace life seemed muted, conversations hushed, and even the birds appeared to sing more quietly. Marcus had been assigned to the Queen Consort's security detail for the past 5 years. Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Camilla, had always been polite but distant with the guards. She maintained the proper royal protocols, acknowledged their presence with brief nods, and rarely engaged in conversation beyond the necessary pleasantries. But lately her behavior had become increasingly erratic. 3 weeks ago, Marcus first noticed the subtle changes. Camilla would glance nervously over her shoulder during public appearances, her hands trembling slightly when she thought no one was watching. She had begun requesting additional security sweeps of her private quarters, claiming she heard strange noises at night. The other guards dismissed it as stress from recent royal duties, but Marcus's instincts told him otherwise. The Queen Consort's daily schedule had also become unpredictable. Previously known for her punctuality and adherence to royal protocols, she now frequently canceled appointments at the last minute. Her private secretary, Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, had confided in Marcus that Camilla had been making unauthorized phone calls late at night, speaking in hushed tones and ending conversations abruptly when anyone entered the room. On this particular Tuesday morning, Marcus was conducting his routine security inspection of the royal vehicles. The Queen Consort was scheduled to attend a charity luncheon in central London, and protocol demanded that every inch of her official car be thoroughly examined. The sleek black Bentley sat gleaming in the palace garage, its armor-plated body reflecting the overhead fluorescent lights. As Marcus circled the vehicle, checking the exterior for any signs of tampering, he noticed something unusual. The rear passenger seat appeared to be sitting slightly askew, as if someone had recently moved it. His trained eye caught the almost imperceptible gap between the seat base and the backrest. In his years of experience, Marcus had learned that such details often revealed important information. Using his security clearance, Marcus accessed the vehicle and began a more thorough inspection. The leather seat smelled of expensive perfume, mixed with something else he couldn't quite identify. As he examined the rear compartment, his fingers detected a slight bulge beneath the seat cushion. The fabric seemed to conceal something hard and rectangular. Marcus's heart rate increased as he carefully lifted the seat cushion. Hidden beneath the luxurious leather was a small digital device he didn't recognize. The rectangular object was no larger than a smartphone, but appeared to be some kind of specialized equipment. Red and green lights blinked intermittently on its surface, suggesting it was actively operating. Further investigation revealed a small cavity that had been professionally carved into the seat frame. The hiding place was so expertly concealed that it would have been invisible during routine inspections. Someone with significant resources and technical knowledge had modified the Queen Consort's official vehicle without authorization from palace security. The implications of this discovery sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Unauthorized electronic devices in royal vehicles could serve numerous purposes, none of them legitimate. The device could be recording conversations, tracking locations, or even worse, it might be designed to interfere with the vehicle's safety systems. In the wrong hands, such equipment could pose a serious threat to royal security. Marcus immediately secured the area and contacted his supervisor, Captain James Morrison. Within minutes, the garage was sealed off, and additional security personnel arrived to assess the situation. The bomb disposal unit was called in to examine the device, while technical experts began analyzing its components and functionality. As the investigation unfolded, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery was connected to Camilla's recent behavioral changes. Her nervousness, the secretive phone calls, and the constant looking over her shoulder suddenly made sense. Either she was aware of the device and involved in its placement, or someone was monitoring her without her knowledge. The technical analysis revealed that the device was a sophisticated surveillance system capable of recording audio and video, tracking GPS coordinates, and transmitting data to an external source. The equipment was military-grade, suggesting professional installation and significant financial backing. This was not the work of amateur criminals or casual privacy invaders. Captain Morrison made the difficult decision to expand the investigation immediately. If the Queen Consort's vehicle had been compromised, other royal family members might also be at risk. Every official car in the royal fleet would need to be thoroughly examined, and all recent modifications or maintenance work would require investigation. Meanwhile, Marcus was assigned to discreetly observe Camilla's activities while the investigation continued. His orders were clear: monitor her movements, note any unusual behavior, and report any suspicious contacts or communications. The palace could not afford to take chances with royal security, especially when the threat appeared to come from within their own circle. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on Marcus's shoulders as he prepared for what might be the most challenging assignment of his career. 23 years of loyal service had prepared him for many scenarios, but investigating a member of the royal family for potential security breaches was uncharted territory. As afternoon approached and Camilla prepared for her scheduled public appearance, Marcus positioned himself strategically to observe her reactions. Would she notice that her vehicle had been inspected? Would her behavior provide additional clues about her involvement with the surveillance device? The Queen Consort emerged from her private quarters precisely on schedule, dressed elegantly in a navy blue ensemble suitable for the charity luncheon. Her demeanor appeared calm and composed, but Marcus detected the same nervous energy he had observed in recent weeks. Her eyes darted quickly around the courtyard, and her hands clasped and unclasped repeatedly as she walked toward the waiting car. The moment of truth was approaching. In a few hours, the investigation would either clear Camilla of any wrongdoing or reveal her involvement in a conspiracy that could shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Marcus steeled himself for whatever revelations lay ahead, knowing that his actions in the coming days might change the course of royal history forever. The charity luncheon proceeded without incident, but Marcus observed every detail of Camilla's behavior throughout the event. She smiled graciously at the assembled donors, delivered her prepared remarks about supporting disadvantaged children, and posed for the customary photographs. To the outside world, she appeared to be the perfect royal consort, but Marcus noticed the subtle signs of distress that others missed. During the return journey to the palace, Camilla sat unusually quiet in the back seat of the replacement vehicle. She stared out the window with unfocused eyes, her fingers drumming nervously against her handbag. Several times she reached for her phone but stopped herself before making any calls. Marcus wondered if she had noticed something different about the car, or suspected that her regular vehicle was being investigated. Back at Buckingham Palace, the technical analysis of the surveillance device had yielded disturbing results. The equipment was traced to a private security company with connections to several international intelligence agencies. The device had been actively transmitting data for approximately 6 months, suggesting that someone had been monitoring the Queen Consort's movements and conversations for an extended period. Even more troubling was the discovery that the device had been programmed with specific trigger words and phrases. Whenever conversations in the vehicle contained certain terms related to royal finances, family disputes, or private medical information, the recording function would activate automatically. This level of sophistication indicated that whoever planted the device had intimate knowledge of royal protocols and access to sensitive information. Captain Morrison briefed Marcus on the investigation's progress in a secure conference room deep within the palace. The walls were lined with soundproof materials, and electronic jamming equipment ensured their conversation could not be intercepted. The gravity of the situation was reflected in Morrison's tense expression and the presence of additional security officials. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins from Scotland Yard's special branch had been called in to assist with the investigation. Her expertise in royal protection and counterintelligence made her the logical choice to handle such a sensitive matter. Collins had worked closely with palace security for over a decade and understood the delicate balance between protecting the monarchy and preserving public confidence in the institution. The investigation team had identified 3 possible scenarios. First, Camilla might be an unwitting victim of surveillance by hostile foreign agents or domestic criminals seeking to exploit royal information for financial gain. Second, she could be aware of the surveillance but afraid to report it due to threats or blackmail. Third, and most troubling, she might be actively collaborating with those conducting the surveillance. Collins explained that similar cases in other countries had revealed complex networks of corruption involving royal family members who had been compromised through gambling debts, extramarital affairs, or financial irregularities. The surveillance device could be part of a larger operation designed to gather blackmail material or insider information about government policies discussed in royal circles. Marcus was assigned to work directly with Detective Inspector Collins, providing her with his detailed observations of Camilla's behavior over the past several weeks. His security clearance and years of experience with royal protection protocols made him invaluable to the investigation. Together, they began piecing together a timeline of events that might explain how the surveillance device came to be installed. The maintenance records for Camilla's official vehicle revealed several interesting details. 3 months ago, the car had been taken to an authorized service center for routine maintenance and upgrades. The work had been performed by Henley Automotive Services, a company that held exclusive contracts for maintaining royal vehicles. However, the technician who had worked on Camilla's car was no longer employed by the company. Collins and Marcus visited Henley Automotive Services to interview the management about the missing technician. The company's director, Mr. Robert Henley, appeared nervous when questioned about David Mackenzie, the former employee who had serviced the Queen Consort's vehicle. Henley claimed that Mackenzie had resigned suddenly, citing personal reasons, but he couldn't provide a forwarding address or contact information. The investigation into David Mackenzie's background revealed a troubling pattern. He had previously worked for several private security companies with questionable reputations, and his financial records showed large cash deposits that coincided with his employment at Henley Automotive. Most concerning was the discovery that Mackenzie had connections to individuals with known links to foreign intelligence services. Meanwhile, Camilla's behavior continued to deteriorate. Palace staff reported that she had become increasingly isolated, spending long hours in her private quarters and declining most social engagements. Her personal assistant noticed that she had been making frequent visits to a small storage room in the palace basement, claiming she was organizing old photographs and documents. Marcus was instructed to discreetly monitor Camilla's movements within the palace. Using his security access, he positioned himself strategically to observe her activities without appearing suspicious. During one of her visits to the basement storage room, he managed to position himself nearby and overheard fragments of a hushed telephone conversation. The conversation was brief and cryptic, but Marcus caught several key phrases that sent alarm bells ringing. Camilla spoke about the arrangement and mentioned that they were becoming impatient. She assured the caller that she would deliver as promised but needed more time to avoid suspicion. The call ended abruptly when she heard footsteps in the corridor above. Collins analyzed the partial conversation and concluded that Camilla was likely communicating with her handlers or controllers. The language suggested an ongoing relationship rather than a one-time transaction, indicating that the surveillance device might be just one component of a larger operation. The reference to delivering as promised implied that she had agreed to provide something valuable in exchange for money or other considerations. The investigation team decided to increase surveillance on Camilla while being careful not to alert her to their suspicions. Additional security cameras were installed in strategic locations, and her telephone calls were monitored through legal channels. The goal was to gather enough evidence to determine the full scope of her involvement and identify all participants in the conspiracy. As the investigation intensified, Marcus found himself torn between his loyalty to the crown and his duty to uncover the truth. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family, but if one of its members was engaged in activities that threatened national security, his obligations became more complex. The weight of potentially explosive revelations pressed heavily on his conscience. The breakthrough came when technical analysis of the surveillance device revealed additional data that had been overlooked in the initial examination. Hidden within the device's memory were encrypted files containing detailed information about royal family schedules, private conversations, and sensitive government meetings that Camilla had attended. The volume and sensitivity of the information suggested that the operation had been running far longer than initially suspected. Detective Inspector Collins prepared to present her findings to the Director of Public Science, Prosecutions and the Home Secretary. The evidence was substantial enough to warrant serious criminal charges, but the political implications of prosecuting a member of the royal family required careful consideration at the highest levels of government. The tension within Buckingham Palace reached a breaking point when additional evidence emerged that forced the investigation team to accelerate their timeline. A routine security sweep of Camilla's private quarters had uncovered a second hidden device, this one concealed within an antique jewelry box that sat prominently on her dressing table. The discovery suggested that the surveillance operation was far more extensive than initially believed. Detective Inspector Collins received urgent intelligence from MI5 indicating that similar devices had been discovered in government buildings across London. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to infiltrate the highest levels of British society and government. Camilla's involvement was no longer an isolated incident, but part of a much larger espionage network that threatened national security. Marcus was briefed on the expanded scope of the investigation during a pre-dawn meeting in a secure facility outside London. The assembled team included representatives from MI5, Scotland Yard's Special Branch, and the Royal Protection Command. The gravity of the situation was emphasized by the presence of Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, the Director General of MI5, who rarely involved himself directly in operational matters. The intelligence services had identified the surveillance equipment as part of a sophisticated operation run by a foreign power seeking to influence British domestic and foreign policy. The devices were designed not just to gather information, but also to facilitate communication between embedded agents and their handlers. Camilla appeared to be one of several high-profile individuals who had been recruited or compromised by this network. Financial investigations had revealed a complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies connected to Camilla's personal finances. Large sums of money had been transferred to accounts under her control through circuitous routes designed to obscure their origin. The amounts were substantial enough to suggest that she was being compensated handsomely for her cooperation with the surveillance operation. The most damaging evidence came from decrypted communications, recovered from the surveillance devices. The messages revealed that Camilla had been providing detailed information about private royal family conversations, upcoming government policy announcements, and sensitive diplomatic negotiations. Her access to King Charles III during private moments had made her an invaluable source of intelligence for foreign operatives. Collins explained to Marcus that the investigation had reached a critical juncture. They had gathered sufficient evidence to arrest Camilla, but the timing and manner of her detention required careful coordination with palace officials and government ministers. The arrest of a senior member of the royal family would create unprecedented constitutional and political challenges. The decision was made to arrest Camilla during what appeared to be a routine security escort to a public engagement. This approach would minimize public attention and allow authorities to control the narrative surrounding her detention. Marcus was selected to make the arrest due to his intimate knowledge of palace security, procedures, and his established relationship with the Queen Consort. Preparation for the arrest required extensive planning and coordination between multiple agencies. Legal advisors confirmed that the evidence was sufficient to support charges of espionage, conspiracy, and violations of the Official Secrets Act. The Crown Prosecution Service had prepared detailed charging documents, and arrangements were made for Camilla to be held at a secure facility designed for high-profile defendants. King Charles III was briefed on the investigation's findings in a private meeting with Sir Geoffrey Hartwell and the Home Secretary. The monarch's reaction was described as one of profound shock and disappointment, but he immediately pledged his full cooperation with the investigation. Palace officials began preparing contingency plans for managing the constitutional crisis that would inevitably follow Camilla's arrest. The morning of the planned arrest arrived with unusual activity throughout the palace. Additional security personnel had been discreetly positioned to ensure that the operation proceeded smoothly, without alerting Camilla to the impending action. Marcus reviewed his instructions one final time, knowing that the next few hours would be among the most challenging of his career. Camilla emerged from her quarters at the scheduled time, dressed elegantly for her planned visit to a children's hospital in North London. She appeared calm and composed, but Marcus noticed the familiar signs of nervousness that had become her trademark in recent weeks. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her handbag, and her eyes darted nervously around the courtyard as she approached the waiting vehicle. The journey to the hospital began normally, with Camilla sitting quietly in the back seat while Marcus and his partner maintained their professional vigilance. The route had been carefully planned, to include a stop at a secure location where additional officers would be waiting to assist with the arrest. Traffic was light and the convoy made good time through the London streets. As they approached the predetermined location, Marcus received the signal from Detective Inspector Collins via his secure radio. The moment he had been dreading and preparing for had finally arrived. He instructed the driver to pull over at the designated spot, ostensibly for a routine security check that was common during royal escorts. Camilla initially showed no signs of alarm when the vehicle stopped. She assumed it was a standard procedure and began checking her appearance in a small compact mirror. However, her demeanor changed dramatically when she noticed additional police vehicles approaching from both directions. The color drained from her face and her hands began to shake visibly. Marcus turned to face Camilla with a heavy heart, knowing that his next words would change everything for the royal family and the British monarchy. He had rehearsed the arrest procedure countless times, but actually executing it felt surreal and momentous. The woman he had sworn to protect was about to become his prisoner. "Your Majesty," Marcus began, using the formal address that protocol demanded even under these extraordinary circumstances. "I am placing you under arrest on suspicion of espionage and conspiracy against the crown. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence." The color completely drained from Camilla's face as the reality of the situation hit her. For a moment she sat in stunned silence, her mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. Then, as the full implications of the arrest became clear, she began to speak rapidly, her voice rising to near hysteria. "You don't understand," she pleaded, her composure completely shattered. "I never wanted any of this to happen. They forced me into it. They have photographs, recordings, things that would destroy Charles and the monarchy. I had no choice but to cooperate with them." Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, while Detective Inspector Collins approached the vehicle to formally take custody of the prisoner. Additional security personnel secured the area while arrangements were made to transport Camilla to the detention facility. The arrest had proceeded smoothly, but Marcus knew that the real challenges lay ahead as the investigation moved into its final phase. The secure detention facility where Camilla was taken was unlike any ordinary police station. Located in a nondescript building in central London, it was specifically designed to handle high-profile prisoners whose cases involved national security concerns. The facility operated under strict protocols that ensured complete isolation from the media and unauthorized personnel while maintaining the legal rights of detainees. Detective Inspector Collins led the initial interrogation, with Marcus observing from an adjacent room through a one-way mirror. The interview room was spartanly furnished with a metal table, 3 chairs, and recording equipment that would capture every word spoken during the questioning. Camilla sat rigidly upright, her royal composure struggling to mask the fear and desperation that showed in her eyes. The interrogation began with Collins methodically presenting the evidence that had been gathered during the investigation. Photographs of the surveillance devices, financial records showing the suspicious transfers, and transcripts of intercepted communications were laid out on the table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that painted a damning picture of espionage and betrayal. Camilla's initial response was to deny any knowledge of the surveillance devices or the financial transactions. She claimed that someone must have planted the equipment in her vehicle and quarters without her knowledge, and that she had no idea how foreign money had found its way into accounts bearing her name. Her denials became increasingly frantic as Collins presented more evidence that contradicted her claims. The breakthrough came when Collins played a recording that had been recovered from one of the surveillance devices. Camilla's voice was clearly audible discussing specific details about a private conversation she had overheard between King Charles and the Prime Minister regarding a sensitive trade negotiation with China. The recording was time-stamped, proving that she had transmitted classified information to her handlers within hours of learning it. Faced with irrefutable evidence of her guilt, Camilla's defiant facade finally crumbled. Tears began streaming down her face as she admitted to her involvement in the espionage operation, but she insisted that she had been coerced into cooperation through blackmail. According to her confession, the operation had begun 3 years earlier when she had been approached by individuals who possessed compromising information about her past. The blackmail material, Camilla revealed, consisted of photographs and documents from her previous marriage that could have caused significant embarrassment to the royal family. The evidence included financial irregularities from her divorce settlement and personal correspondence that revealed unflattering opinions about other members of the royal family. Her handlers had threatened to release this information unless she agreed to provide intelligence about royal activities. Collins pressed Camilla for details about her handlers and the structure of the espionage network. Initially reluctant to provide names and specifics, she gradually opened up as the reality of her situation became clear. She described a sophisticated operation run by individuals who claimed to represent business interests but were clearly connected to foreign intelligence services. The primary contact was a man known to her only as Mr. Davidson, who presented himself as a businessman with interests in international trade. He would meet Camilla at seemingly innocent social events or charity functions, where they would have brief conversations that appeared to be casual small talk, but were actually intelligence briefings. Davidson would provide her with specific questions to ask Charles during private moments and topics to steer conversations. Toward Camilla's confession revealed that the espionage network had been particularly interested in obtaining advance information about British foreign policy decisions, especially those related to China, Russia, and Middle Eastern affairs. They had also sought details about the personal relationships between royal family members and their private opinions about government ministers and international leaders. The financial rewards for her cooperation had been substantial. Camilla admitted to receiving over £2 million through various channels during the 3-year period of her involvement. The money had been used to pay for personal expenses, including luxury items and private investments that she had concealed from her husband and financial advisors. As the interrogation continued, Collins and her team began to understand the full scope of the damage that Camilla's betrayal had caused to British national security. The intelligence she had provided had given foreign powers unprecedented insight into the highest levels of British government and society. Diplomatic negotiations had been compromised, and sensitive military and economic information had been exposed. Marcus watched the proceedings with a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal disappointment. His instincts and investigative work had uncovered a major security breach, but the cost to the institution he had sworn to protect was immeasurable. The arrest of a queen consort for espionage was unprecedented in British history and would have profound implications for the monarchy's reputation and stability. The legal team representing the Crown prepared to present Camilla's case to the courts, but they faced unique challenges in prosecuting a member of the royal family. Constitutional experts were consulted to determine the proper procedures for handling such an extraordinary situation, while government ministers worked to minimize the political fallout from the scandal. King Charles III faced the most difficult decision of his reign as he grappled with the personal and constitutional implications of his wife's betrayal. Palace advisors recommended that he maintain complete separation from Camilla's case and cooperate fully with the investigation. But the emotional toll of the situation was evident to those close to the monarch. The investigation team expanded their efforts to identify and arrest other members of the espionage network. Camilla's cooperation in providing names and details about her handlers led to a series of raids across London and other British cities. Several individuals connected to the operation were taken into custody, while others fled the country before they could be apprehended. International intelligence agencies were briefed on the case, and efforts were made to track down the ultimate controllers of the espionage network. The sophistication of the operation and the quality of the equipment used suggested backing by a major foreign power, but proving direct government involvement would require extensive international cooperation and investigation. Media speculation about Camilla's sudden absence from public engagements had begun to intensify, but palace officials managed to maintain the cover story that she was receiving medical treatment for a minor condition. However, they knew that the truth could not be concealed indefinitely. and preparations were made for managing the public relations crisis that would inevitably follow the revelation of her arrest. As the fourth day of detention concluded, Camilla remained in custody while prosecutors finalized the charges against her. The evidence was overwhelming, and her confession had provided enough information to ensure conviction on multiple counts of espionage and conspiracy. The question was no longer whether she would be prosecuted, but how severe her sentence would be and what long-term damage her actions had caused to British national security and the reputation of the monarchy. The government faced an unprecedented constitutional crisis as news of Camilla's arrest began to leak, despite their best efforts to maintain secrecy. Prime Minister Richardson convened an emergency session of the Cobra Committee, bringing together the most senior government ministers, intelligence chiefs, and constitutional experts to address the implications of prosecuting a queen consort for high treason. Lord Chancellor Victoria Pemberton presented a detailed analysis of the legal precedents and constitutional implications. No British queen consort had ever been charged with espionage, and the last time a member of the royal family faced criminal prosecution was during the 18th century. The legal framework for handling such a case was largely untested, requiring careful navigation of ancient laws and modern judicial procedures. Meanwhile, international allies were being briefed on the security breach to assess the damage to ongoing intelligence operations and diplomatic relationships. The revelation that sensitive conversations involving foreign policy had been compromised required immediate damage control measures. Ambassador briefings were hastily arranged to reassure key allies that steps were being taken to prevent future breaches. King Charles III struggled with the personal devastation of his wife's betrayal while fulfilling his constitutional duties as monarch. Palace insiders reported that he had aged visibly in the days following Camilla's arrest, the weight of the crisis evident in his drawn features and subdued demeanor. Yet he maintained his official schedule, understanding that any display of weakness could further destabilize the monarchy. Detective Inspector Collins continued her investigation into the broader espionage network, working closely with MI5 and international partners to track down Camilla's handlers. The man known as Mr. Davidson had disappeared shortly before Camilla's arrest, suggesting that the network had been warned about the investigation. However, surveillance footage and financial records provided leads that investigators hoped would eventually lead to his capture. The evidence recovered from Camilla's confession led to the discovery of a safe house in an exclusive London neighborhood where the espionage operation had been coordinated. When authorities raided the property, they found sophisticated communication equipment, false identification documents, and detailed files on numerous high-profile British citizens who had apparently been targeted for recruitment. Among the most disturbing discoveries were files indicating that the espionage network had attempted to recruit other members of the royal family, senior government ministers, and military officials. While Camilla appeared to be their most successful asset, the scope of their ambitions suggested a comprehensive effort to penetrate every level of British society and government. Marcus found himself thrust into a more prominent role as the investigation expanded. His detailed knowledge of royal security procedures and his observations of Camilla's behavior made him valuable in analyzing other potential security breaches. He was assigned to review years of security reports to identify any patterns that might indicate additional compromised individuals within the royal household. The psychological profile of Camilla that emerged from extensive interviews painted a picture of a woman who had been systematically manipulated and exploited by professional intelligence operatives. Experts explained that her initial cooperation had likely been obtained through blackmail, but over time she had become psychologically dependent on her handlers and the financial rewards they provided. Dr. Miranda Ashworth, a forensic psychologist specializing in espionage cases, interviewed Camilla extensively to understand her motivations and the methods used to control her. The sessions revealed that Camilla had been slowly drawn deeper into the operation through a carefully orchestrated process that had gradually normalized her participation in activities she initially found abhorrent. The financial investigation uncovered a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that had been used to funnel money to Camilla and potentially other assets. The total amount involved exceeded £10 million, suggesting that the operation had been lavishly funded by its sponsors. Tracing the money to its ultimate source became a priority for both British and international investigators. Public speculation about Camilla's absence from royal duties had reached fever pitch, with tabloid newspapers running increasingly wild theories about her condition and whereabouts. Palace Press Secretary Amanda Foster struggled to maintain the medical treatment cover story while preparing for the inevitable revelation of the truth. Media strategy sessions focused on damage control and preserving public confidence in the monarchy. The international implications of the case became clearer as intelligence agencies shared information about similar operations in other countries. The espionage network appeared to be part of a global effort to infiltrate and influence Western governments and institutions. Camilla's case was just one piece of a much larger puzzle that threatened international security and stability. Legal proceedings moved forward as prosecutors finalized their case against Camilla. The charges included multiple counts of espionage, conspiracy to commit treason, violations of the Official Secrets Act, and money laundering. Each charge carried serious penalties, and the cumulative effect could result in a life sentence if she were convicted on all counts. The decision to hold Camilla's trial in a special security court was made to protect sensitive information while ensuring that justice was served. The proceedings would be largely closed to the public, with only essential personnel and selected media representatives allowed to attend. This approach would help preserve national security while maintaining the transparency necessary for a fair trial. King Charles faced mounting pressure to address the nation about the crisis, but his advisors counseled patience until the legal proceedings were further advanced. Any premature statement could prejudice the trial or create additional constitutional complications. However, plans were being developed for a carefully crafted speech that would acknowledge the situation while preserving the dignity of the monarchy. The impact on the royal family's relationships and dynamics was profound. Other members of the family expressed shock and betrayal upon learning of Camilla's actions, while also struggling to understand how such a breach could have occurred under their noses. Prince William and Princess Catherine were briefed on the situation and began preparing for increased royal duties to compensate for the crisis. As the investigation entered its final phase, Marcus reflected on how his routine security inspection had uncovered one of the most significant espionage cases in British history. His dedication to duty and attention to detail had prevented further damage to national security. But the personal cost to the royal family and the institution of the monarchy would be felt for years to come. The network of international investigators working on the case had made significant progress in identifying other members of the espionage ring, but much work remained to be done. The sophistication and scope of the operation suggested that dismantling it completely would require sustained effort and continued international cooperation. The trial of Queen Consort Camilla began 6 months after her arrest in the highest security courtroom in London. The proceedings were held at the Central Criminal Court, commonly known as the Old Bailey, but in a specially modified courtroom equipped with advanced security measures and electronic jamming equipment to prevent unauthorized surveillance or communication. Mr. Justice Sir Harold Whitmore, one of Britain's most experienced judges in national security cases, presided over the trial. His reputation for fairness, combined with his understanding of the delicate constitutional issues involved, made him the unanimous choice to handle this unprecedented case. The courtroom was filled with tension as history unfolded before a limited audience of legal professionals, security officials, and carefully selected journalists. The prosecution team, led by Attorney General Sir Michael Thornberry, presented a comprehensive case that methodically detailed Camilla's 3-year involvement in the espionage operation. They showed how she had systematically betrayed her oath to the Crown and her duty to the British people by providing classified information to foreign agents in exchange for substantial financial compensation. Evidence presented included the surveillance devices found in her vehicle and private quarters, financial records showing millions of pounds in payments from offshore accounts, and most damaging of all, recordings of her own voice transmitting sensitive information to her handlers. The prosecution argued that her actions had compromised national security and damaged Britain's relationships with key allies. Camilla's defense team, headed by Sir Geoffrey Masters QC, one of London's most prominent criminal barristers, faced the nearly impossible task of defending their client against overwhelming evidence. Their strategy focused on portraying her as a victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation and blackmail rather than a willing traitor who had acted purely for financial gain. Dr. Miranda Ashworth testified as an expert witness for the defense, explaining how intelligence agencies use advanced psychological techniques to recruit and control assets. She described the process of gradual corruption that had transformed Camilla from an unwilling victim of blackmail into a cooperative source of intelligence, emphasizing the sophisticated nature of the manipulation she had endured. The defense presented evidence of the original blackmail material that had been used to coerce Camilla's initial cooperation. Photographs and documents from her past were shown to the court, revealing embarrassing but not criminal activities that had made her vulnerable to exploitation. The defense argued that any reasonable person in her position would have initially cooperated. To protect their family's reputation, Marcus was called to testify about his discovery of the surveillance device and his subsequent observations of Camilla's behavior. His testimony was crucial in establishing the timeline of events and providing context for the investigation that had led to her arrest. Under cross-examination, he maintained his professional composure while describing the difficult process of investigating someone he had been sworn to protect. The prosecution's case was strengthened by testimony from intelligence officials who described the significant damage that Camilla's betrayal had caused to British interests. Specific examples were presented in closed sessions to protect ongoing operations, but the court was left in no doubt about the serious consequences of her actions for national security and international relationships. International witnesses, testifying via secure video links to protect their identities, provided evidence about the global scope of the espionage network that had recruited Camilla. Their testimony revealed that similar operations had been conducted in other countries, with varying degrees of success in penetrating government and royal institutions. The revelation that emerged during the trial shocked even seasoned observers of the case. Evidence presented by MI5 showed that the espionage network had been planning to use Camilla to facilitate the assassination of a visiting foreign dignitary during a state dinner at Buckingham Palace. While the plot had not reached an advanced stage, the discovery demonstrated that her handlers viewed her as more than just a source of information. This evidence proved to be the turning point in the trial, as it showed that Camilla's involvement had progressed far beyond passive information gathering to active participation in planning violent acts against guests of the British state. The defense's argument that she was merely a victim of manipulation became much more difficult to sustain in light of this revelation. King Charles was not required to testify, but his written statement was read to the court, expressing his complete shock and devastation at learning of his wife's betrayal. The statement, carefully crafted by palace lawyers, emphasized his full cooperation with the investigation while maintaining the dignity appropriate to his position as monarch. The trial revealed additional details about the scope of Camilla's intelligence gathering that had not been disclosed during the investigation. She had provided information about private conversations involving not just British officials, but also foreign heads of state who had visited Britain or spoken with King Charles during official functions. Public interest in the trial was intense despite the restricted access to the proceedings. Daily briefings were provided to accredited journalists who reported on the key developments while respecting the security restrictions that prevented disclosure of certain sensitive information. The story dominated international news coverage and sparked debates about security procedures in royal households worldwide. The psychological toll on Camilla became evident as the trial progressed. She appeared increasingly frail and withdrawn, occasionally breaking down in tears when particularly damaging evidence was presented. Medical professionals were consulted to ensure she remained fit to stand trial, but her deteriorating condition was apparent to all observers. As the prosecution concluded its case, the weight of evidence against Camilla seemed overwhelming. The defense had succeeded in generating some sympathy for her initial predicament, but had been unable to excuse her continued cooperation with the espionage network over such an extended period, especially after the discovery of the assassination plot. The closing arguments began with the prosecution emphasizing the unprecedented nature of the betrayal and the severe damage it had caused to British interests. They argued that regardless of how her involvement had begun, Camilla had ultimately chosen to continue her cooperation for financial gain, and had shown no remorse until her arrest made continued denial impossible. The defense made an emotional final plea for leniency, arguing that Camilla had been a victim of circumstances beyond her control, and that her punishment should reflect the coercive nature of her recruitment. They emphasized her cooperation with the investigation after her arrest, and her obvious remorse for the consequences of her actions. As the trial moved toward its conclusion, observers speculated about the potential verdict and sentence. The evidence of guilt was clear, but the unprecedented nature of the case meant that predicting the outcome was extremely difficult. The constitutional implications of convicting a queen consort added another layer of complexity to an already extraordinary situation. The jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching their verdict, a period that felt like an eternity for everyone involved in the case. The weight of their decision was unprecedented in British legal history, as they were being asked to convict a queen consort of high treason and espionage. The implications of their verdict would resonate far beyond the courtroom and affect the very foundations of the British constitutional system. On a gray Tuesday morning in November, the court reconvened to hear the verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Camilla stood to face the jury foreman. Her appearance had deteriorated significantly during the trial, and she required assistance to remain standing as the verdicts were read on each of the multiple charges she faced. Guilty was the word that echoed through the courtroom 12 times as the jury foreman read their decisions on each count of espionage, conspiracy, and violations of the Official Secrets Act. The only charge on which they found her not guilty was the most serious count of treason, apparently accepting the defense argument that her actions, while reprehensible, did not meet the highest standard of betraying the crown with intent to harm the sovereign. The conviction of a queen consort sent shockwaves through Britain and around the world. Within hours of the verdict, King Charles issued a statement through Buckingham Palace expressing his profound sadness at the outcome, while emphasizing his respect for the judicial process and the rule of law. The statement announced that Camilla's titles and position within the royal family were immediately suspended pending the completion of her sentencing. Mr. Justice Sir Harold Whitmore faced the unprecedented task of sentencing a member of the royal family for such serious crimes. Legal precedents were virtually non-existent, and constitutional experts debated the appropriate punishment for someone in Camilla's unique position. The judge took 2 weeks to consider his decision, consulting with senior legal authorities and constitutional scholars. During the sentencing hearing, victim impact statements were read describing the damage that Camilla's betrayal had caused to British national security. Intelligence officials testified about compromised operations, damaged relationships with allies, and the ongoing costs of repairing the security breaches she had created. The cumulative effect painted a picture of betrayal with consequences that would be felt for years to come. The defense made a final plea for mercy, emphasizing Camilla's age, her health problems that had emerged during her detention, and her cooperation with authorities after her arrest. Character witnesses, including longtime palace staff members, testified about her previous good character and the positive work she had done for various charities before her involvement in espionage. Marcus was present in the courtroom for the sentencing, reflecting on the journey that had begun with his routine inspection of a royal vehicle and led to this historic moment. His dedication to duty and attention to detail had uncovered one of the most significant security breaches in British history, though he took no satisfaction in the personal destruction it had caused. Justice Whitmore delivered his sentence with grave solemnity, acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the case and the need to balance justice with the unique circumstances surrounding the defendant. He sentenced Camilla to 18 years in prison, noting that while her initial cooperation had been coerced, her continued participation for financial gain and her involvement in planning violent acts against state guests could not be excused. The sentence was considered relatively lenient given the severity of the charges, but the judge explained that he had taken into account her age, her cooperation with the investigation, and the extraordinary circumstances that had led to her recruitment. He also noted that the destruction of her reputation and position was itself a significant punishment that would last for the remainder of her life. The international espionage network that had recruited Camilla was largely dismantled through the investigation that followed her arrest. Several key figures were arrested in coordinated raids across Europe, though the mastermind known as Mr. Davidson remained at large. Intelligence agencies continued their efforts to track down the remaining members and identify the foreign power that had sponsored the operation. King Charles faced the painful process of rebuilding his life and the monarchy's reputation in the aftermath of his wife's conviction. Constitutional experts worked with palace officials to establish new protocols for royal security and to prevent similar breaches in the future. The reforms included enhanced background checks, regular security reviews, and stricter controls on royal family members' financial activities. The broader implications of the case led to a comprehensive review of security procedures throughout the British government and royal institutions. Parliament established a special committee to investigate how such a significant breach had gone undetected for so long, and to recommend improvements to prevent future occurrences. Marcus received commendation for his role in uncovering the espionage operation, though he maintained that he had simply been doing his duty as he had been trained. He was promoted to inspector within the Royal Protection Command and assigned to lead a new unit responsible for internal security reviews and threat assessment. The public reaction to Camilla's conviction was complex, with some expressing satisfaction that justice had been served while others felt sympathy for a woman they saw as having been manipulated and exploited. Opinion polls showed that while confidence in the monarchy had been shaken, most Britons supported King Charles and believed he had handled the crisis appropriately. Camilla was transferred to a secure facility designed for high-profile prisoners, where she would serve her sentence away from media attention and potential threats from other inmates. Reports from the prison indicated that she had adapted poorly to incarceration and required ongoing medical and psychological support. The intelligence services used information gathered during the investigation to identify and neutralize other espionage operations targeting British institutions. The case became a textbook example of how foreign powers attempt to penetrate democratic societies and the importance of maintaining robust security procedures even at the highest levels of government. 1 year after her conviction, Camilla remained in prison while her lawyers pursued various appeals. The constitutional questions raised by her case continued to be debated by legal scholars, and new legislation was proposed to clarify the procedures for handling criminal cases involving members of the royal family. The story of Royal Guard Marcus Thompson and his discovery of the surveillance device beneath Queen Consort Camilla's car seat had become a landmark case in British legal and constitutional history. It demonstrated that no one, regardless of their position or title, was above the law, while also highlighting the ongoing threats facing democratic institutions in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. The legacy of the case would be felt for generations, serving as both a cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities of those in positions of power and a testament to the importance of dedicated public servants who remain vigilant in protecting the institutions they serve. For Marcus, it represented the successful completion of the most important investigation of his career, even though the personal cost to those involved would never be forgotten.